This is Klaus. He's a crochet mouse. He listens to Strauss in his cardboard house. But not today. I heard him say he wants to play, so he's on his way. Hey everybody! Squeak squeak! We've had a lot of requests to make Mousy. You've probably seen this little guy in my hair from time to time, and right now he's sitting on my shoulder. This little mouse is really easy to make using scraps, couple beads, a little bit of embroidery floss, whatever you've got lying around the house. And as an added bonus, if you stuff him with a little bit of catnip, he'll be a very fun toy for any of you cat lovers out there. But even without the catnip, he'd probably make short work of one of these little munchkins pretty quickly. This is the same mouse. In fact, this is the same mouse. This mouse pattern, if you change the size of your yarn and the size of your hook, can change up the size of your finished product. And I wanted to show that to you today so that you can decide if you want to make a little mouse accessory for your hair, or if you want to make more of a toy-sized mousey for your friends, your kids, your cats, whomever you think might like a little mouse. If you use worsted weight scraps, sort of your Red Heart Super Saver stuff, and a 4.25 millimeter hook, you get a mouse about this size, maybe even a little bit bigger. And if you use sock weight yarn and maybe a 2.75 or a 3.0 millimeter hook, you'll get a little mousey just like this one, but it's exactly the same pattern. So without further squeaks, let us mince our way over to the craft table, and maybe there's some cheese there. That'd make you nice, eh? To make our little mice, all you really need is some scrap yarn. So I've got, these are both made out of acrylic scraps, and they're two different sizes, and I wanted to just give you a quick note on that. This is your typical worsted weight 3-ply, 4-ply kind of yarn. You're going to get a mouse that's big enough to fit in your hand if you use that yarn. If you use the Red Heart, this guy will be a little bit bigger. This is just slightly thinner yarn than that. And this is sock weight yarn. This little guy is made using sock weight yarn. And the difference is this sock weight yarn is really, really, really skinny. And here is a typical yarn, typical sort of worsted weight scrap yarn next to it. So you can see the difference. Sock weight is a lot skinnier. If you're going to use sock weight yarn, use a slightly smaller hook, say a 3 millimeter, maybe a 2.75 millimeter, something smaller so that your stitches remain nice and small and your stuffing doesn't show through. But if you're going to make this guy out of your typical worsted weight scraps, I'm going to use a G6, so a 4.25 millimeter hook. It's the one I like to use. This size is the most comfortable for me, especially with that size yarn. You need a yarn needle with a nice big eye, pair of scissors, a little bit of stuffing. You're going to need a needle and thread and a couple of beads. This is for the eyes. So you can use a couple of beads for the eyes, like I've done with this little guy here. Or you can put in French knots with more scrap yarn if you're giving it to a very small person and you don't want the possibility of the beads to come off into their little mouths. And the nose that I've put on these little guys is just using, this one was using thread, so just a whole bunch of thread double needled, or I should say double threaded through the needle. This was the sock weight yarn, and I've also made them using embroidery floss. So whatever you've got lying around, you can embroider a cute little nose on your mouse, and those are just the cute little finishing touches you need in order to make this nifty little scrap squeaker. So without further ado, let's get into the tutorial. We're going to start with the nose section of our little mouse, and we're going to work in the round, and the most comfortable way I find to do that is to start with a cinch circle. So you make yourself a loop, and if you have trouble with the cinch circle, I've got a tutorial for that. I'll put the link to it in the description box down below. And you do this almost like you're going to do a slip knot, but then you chain one just before you let go of everything. And that secures your cinch circle. Into this cinch circle, we are only going to do 4 single crochets. I like to work over my short tail. You don't have to, but I find that that is a little neater but whatever's comfortable for you. It mostly works out being the same in the end, so don't worry. So you want 4 single crochets into your cinch circle, and once you've got your 4, you're going to take that little short tail and cinch it shut, and that's what creates the cinch part of the cinch circle. Now we don't join our rows with a slip stitch. This little amigurumi is made in the round, so we are going to work directly into the next stitch. If you have trouble keeping track of where your first stitch on your first row is, you can put a stitch marker or a safety pin in on this stitch or on the last one that you just did. And that's helpful if you need to easily see your first or last stitch, because I like to use it as a reference point. So go ahead and put a little marker somewhere in between those 2 stitches or right on top of them if you feel that's necessary. Into the next stitch, so I've got that next stitch highlighted already, we are going to put 2 single crochets. So I'm going to try and keep my little short tail out of the way, and I'm going to work 2 single crochets into that next stitch, 1 single crochet into the next stitch, and I'm just going to work a little over my tail here. Into that next stitch, this one here, 2 more single crochets, 1, 2, and into the last stitch of your first row, 1 single crochet. So you've gone from a total of 4 stitches to a total of 6 stitches. And just so you can tell, there's the start point, and that's going to become necessary to see later. So now we're on to row 3. Into the next stitch, which is this one again, so we're still going around and around, we're going to work 2 single crochet. 1 and 2. We're going to work 1 single crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. And I'm still working over my short tail here. You don't have to. I just like to do it because it's neat and tidy for me. Into the next stitch, you're going to do 2 single crochet. 1 and 2. And into the last 2 stitches of that row, you're going to work a single crochet into each one. 1 and 2. So now our stitch count has gone from 4 in row 1 to 6 in row 2 to 8 in row 3. In row 4, which is this next row we're working into, you're just going to keep going into the next stitch. You're going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch all the way around, and you're going to continue with a total of 8. So I like to count 2, 3. Okay, that's 8 single crochet. Now, this is where it becomes important. Because we're making an amigurumi that has a specific shaping to it, we need to make sure that we are always using our start position as a reference. So just to make it a little easier, I'm going to go ahead and put a safety pin in there right now. Okay, so just so you can sort of see, I've highlighted that first or last stitch of my first row. This one here, I've got the pin running underneath it, just so I can use it as a reference point for finishing off my rows. So for example, I want to finish my row 8. Now I've done my row, I've gone around 8 stitches, but I just want to make sure that my last stitch lines up with this one. So you see there's that stitch there. I'm going to work into it. When you add an extra stitch to a row like this, you're not actually changing the count. So there are still 8 single crochets all the way around the top of this little row here. I'm just sort of changing where I start my next row. So I'm going to start my next row in this stitch. And because I didn't increase in this row, I still have 8. I could keep going around and around and around, and the stitch count wouldn't change. So just in case you were worried about that, this is where I want to start the increase for my next row. This is row 5, and this is where we start to form the bridge of the nose. of our little mouse. So into that next stitch, we're going to single crochet 2, and you're going to single crochet 2 stitches into each of the next 3 stitches across the top of your little amigurumi here. So after the first 4 stitches have passed, you will have a total of 8. So in other words, you're doing 2 single crochet in each of the first 4 stitches of row 5. You're going to single crochet into the next 4 stitches, just 1 stitch per stitch, and row 5 will give you a total of 12 stitches at the end. There you go. Now, in row 6, you're going to just single crochet in each stitch around. So you've done your increasing, and you're just going to do a straight row of single crochet. 1, 2, 11, and 12. And once again, we're going to even up the row with that start point. So there's the start point, and I want to even up the row, so I'm going to make sure that I finish stitching in that stitch directly above it, so in line with my little start point. And that just basically keeps me creating the increases in the same place over and over and over again. And that's what's going to give me a nice even shape all the way around. It's very important when you're making an amigurumi that has oddball increasing to make sure that you always start those increasing rows in line with your start point, and that way your shaping will be even, and you won't get anything that looks kind of mutant. We don't want a mutant mouse. Maybe not today. Maybe we'll do that one closer to Halloween. Okay, we're into row 7 now. So row 6 was just straight single crochet all the way around. You have a total of 12 stitches on this row, and row 7 we're going to do another increase. So across the next 8 stitches, you're going to 2 single crochet into each one. So you'll have 16 by the time you get to the end of the 8th stitch. So 2 single crochet into each of the next 8 stitches. 15 and 16. Okay. So now you've got something that should look a bit like this. You're kind of creating a fan across the top. We're not finished this row yet. There are 4 unworked stitches, and you're just going to single crochet into each of those. Just a single crochet into each of those 4 stitches that are left. And your row will go from 12 in the previous to a total of 20 stitches. So now you've got 20 stitches. The next 5 rows are just straight single crochet. So what we're doing is we're now creating this part, this rounded, chubby body, and heading into his bottom. So we're doing the whole body part now, and it's just straight single crochet. So now that you've got your final row of increase, you've got a total of 20 stitches. You can just single crochet in each stitch all the way around for 5 straight rows. 1, 2. Okay, we are at the end of row 12. So after your last decrease, or should I say increase row, you did 5 straight rows of single crochet, and you want to finish your last row in line with your stitch marker. And there's my stitch. And if I go straight up, oh, it looks like I put in 1 extra, so I'm going to take that out because I want to make sure that I start to decrease now in the same alignment with where I started my increase, because now we're going to form his little bum. So we're going to start row 13 with a decrease. So we're going to single crochet 2 stitches together, and as you know, you pick up a loop in the next one just like you were going to single crochet, but you pick up a loop in the stitch next to that one before you do anything. So you've got 3 loops on your hook, wrap your yarn, and pull back through all 3. That is how you single crochet 2 stitches together. That's a decrease. Now you're going to do that across the next 14 stitches. So you've single crocheted 2 together, and you're going to single crochet 2 stitches together across the next 16. So you're reversing the increase you did here. So you're going to take these 16 stitches and turn them into 8. So you'll have 8 decrease stitches in total, or single crochet 2 together across 16. 8. All right. It should look something like this now. You've closed in that end by single crocheting 2 together across 16 stitches. And try to keep your stitches somewhat loose. You don't want to make them too tight, otherwise you'll get sort of gaps forming. But even if you get gaps, we can fix that later, so don't panic. You've got 4 stitches left in that row, so you're just going to single crochet, nice and normal, across those 4 stitches. And that brings us to the end of row 13. Row 14, we're still decreasing. Now you can take an opportunity, because this hole is nice size right now, if you want to start stuffing the nose of your mouse. So if you want to grab your stuffing and rip off some very small little pieces. Remember, when you're stuffing small spots in an amigurumi, you don't want to have great big chunks of stuffing because it won't fill up the space in a neat, even way. So you just want to take a little bit, stuff it into the nose with your finger. If you're making a really small one, then either use the butt end of a pencil with an eraser or a slightly larger crochet hook to get it into those little spaces. And I'm going to put in as much as I need to kind of fill up most of the body, but I'm not going to overstuff it because I don't want it to be too firm. Then the other nice thing about crochet amigurumi is that if you don't overstuff them, you can kind of manipulate their shape on the outside. You can sort of squish them and like I can make his little nose turn up a little bit. And if you overstuff it, you lose the flexibility of doing that. So don't overstuff your amigurumi. And remember, if you're turning this into a cat toy, this is a good time to put a little bit of catnip, if you're so inclined, somewhere into the middle of your little stuffed toy. But I think a cat would pretty much destroy this with or without the catnip in it. So once you've got your stuffing in, we can continue on to the next row. It's another row of decrease, and it's again the opposite of the first row of super decrease. So we're going to single crochet 2 together across the next 8 stitches, and that will bring us down to 4 single crochet 2 together stitches. So single crochet 2 together across the next 8, and that will give you 4 stitches. And then you're going to single crochet across the bottom stitches, so 1 in each stitch, and this will give you a total of 8 for this row. Okay, we're at the end pretty much. So if you've got any more sort of room in there and you want to put a little bit more stuffing in, just a tiny wee bit, and that should be it for stuffing. So I'm just going to sort of stick this tiny wee little last bit of stuffing in there, just so he's got a nice round bum. And we're going to close up our hole. We're going to single crochet 2 together, and then we're going to slip stitch around the post. This is the post of a stitch. It's that bit that runs sort of perpendicular? Yes, perpendicular to the top of the stitch, which runs parallel. It sort of looks like a T off balance. And we're going to put our hook through that little piece and just slip stitch, because I have found that this kind of closes up a hole in the same sort of way that single crocheting 2 together does. It's just that it makes it flatter, so you're not adding extra sort of height or width to your toy, and you're kind of neatly closing up the little hole as you go. So just slip stitch around a few posts, and once it's closed or almost closed, maybe do 1 or 2 more, but you don't have to completely cinch it shut, because what we're going to do is we're going to cut a long tail when we're finished, and we're going to just cinch shut whatever might be left there. So I'm going to look at my mouse and decide that that's definitely the top, and that's his little nose, and this is the bottom of him. And I'm going to slip stitch around to the bottom of this hole. So I'm just going to pick up one more little, I'm going to try and pick up a couple more of these little posts. And make sure that I am finished on the bottom. So if I do this and go right up to the bottom, that's roughly the bottom of my mouse, or it's in line with the bottom of my mouse. So now we're going to make his tail. From here, chain 14. 1, 2, 3, 4, 13, 14. You've got a chain of 14. We're not finished yet. You're going to slip stitch into the second chain from the hook, and you're going to slip stitch in each chain all the way back to your little mousey. Once you've gotten down to the end of that chain length that you made, and you're back at the back end of your mouse, pick a little spot on the bottom of that sort of space that you were closing, and just slip stitch to firmly attach the tail end of your tail to the back end of your mouse, and then cut a fairly long amount of yarn. Fasten off. Just pull it all the way through that last loop, and then from here you can take your yarn needle and thread up that tail, and you can go around picking up stitches and cinching shut any of the little spaces that are left from the decreasing. You can also go through, so you can go all the way through that little hole that's left. Just pick up some of the stitches and gently cinch shut the back end of your mouse. And this does two things. It helps keep the holes to a smaller size so that you don't see the stuffing. And it also gives you the opportunity to make the back end of your mouse a little rounder, a little more formed. So you can use this chance to help form your mouse. And I'll let you do a little of that. After you've woven in that end and made sure that the back end of your mouse is nice and cinched shut, it's time to make his ears. And in order to make his ears, we're going to start with a slip knot. You can make a slip knot any way you like. Just make sure that when it's on your hook, it doesn't move around. It moves around sort of comfortably and it's not too tight. We're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And into that first chain, we're going to half double crochet 6 times. So you wrap your yarn around your hook, put your hook through that first chain, wrap your yarn around your hook again, and pull up a loop so that you've got 3 loops on your hook. Wrap your yarn around your hook and pull that back through all 3 loops. That's a half double crochet. And if you hang on to your work as you half double crochet, and don't be, try not to be too tight or too yanky, then you won't end up making that hole very, very big. But if you do, don't worry, you can always cinch it shut later on. So 6 half double crochets into that first chain. Once you've got your 6 half double crochets into your first chain, it should look something like this. You're going to cut a longish tail, maybe 5 or 6 inches. Pull it back through your last loop and tug it off because you're fastening off. Grab your yarn needle, thread up that long tail, and here's where the magic happens. You're going to take your needle and you're going to put it through the top of the chain 2, 3. So you chain 3 to start. We did all of our work into the first chain, and right here where it kind of bends into your first half double crochet, you're just going to put your needle right through there. And voila, one mouse ear. Now, if you've got a gigantic hole here, just sew up a little bit on the back, but make sure you bring your yarn back down so that it's at the bottom of your pointed ear part, because that's the part we're going to sew onto the mouse. So go ahead and make 2 of these, and then we'll put them on our mice. When you want to put your ears on your mice, make sure that you take a good look at your mouse and decide where the top of his little head is. So this is the head part here, and I'm going to put his ears in on either side of the space of his head just before we start to increase, so that his little ears sit right at the top of his head. So, and you want to make sure they're evenly separated over his head. So what I like to do is just kind of pick a spot, identify a stitch, thread up that long tail, and then just to get started, pull it through. And that will automatically sort of stick it to that one little area that you want. So from here you can kind of manipulate it. You want to run your needle through the back to the front, and then through the bottom of a stitch on the head of your mouse. And this doesn't have to be really, really fine work, but don't make the stitches too tight, just until you realize that you like the shape of your ear and the direction that it's facing. So just put in a few stitches from the back to the front, or the front to the back, through your ear, so the bottom point of your ear, and a few stitches through the bottom of your head of your mouse. I'm going to do maybe 3 or 4. And once I feel that it's on there pretty tight, and I like the shape of the ear and the direction that it's facing in, I'll put in one last stitch, and then I'm going to take the yarn and pull it up through a space between stitches somewhere in the top of the body of my mouse, and just leave it there, because I'm going to put the second one on, and when I'm finished sewing it on, I'm going to pull its tail through the same space, knot them both together, and weave my ends into the mouse. And that keeps me from having knots on the outside of my mouse. And the little tiny tails, if you have those, just pull them into the body of your mouse too. And that's the ears. Next we're going to put on his eyes. I like to double thread a needle. So you run the thread through your needle, and then you knot it at the very bottom. I'm just going to bring it up through the bottom chin of my mouse and right out where I want my first bead to go. And I'm putting pink eyes on my white mouse. Thread up my first bead, go over a stitch, and come out the opposite side where I want my other eye to be. And then thread up my other bead, and I'm just going to go back and forth through my mouse a few times, going through the button, or through the beads, and just pinching ever so slightly so that I kind of bring the little nose between the eyes in a little tighter. Once you're done, just knot off down the bottom of his chin and weave your little edges in. The very last thing you want to do is give him a nose. So you can give him a great big sort of clownish nose with some yarn like I did here, or you can give him a nice sweet little tiny nose with some sewing thread or embroidery floss like I did with this one. And all you really want to do is just sort of stitch over top of that little bunty bit at the end of your mouse. So you can sort of start anywhere you want. All you're doing is highlighting that end of the nose. And you can do as many little stitches or as few stitches there as you want. Once you're done just sort of embroidering a cute, simple little nose on the end of his face, just knot your ends together, pull them into your body, and you're all done. Squeak, squeak, squeak. There you go, everybody. That's how you make a simple crocheted little mousey. And if you make them really small, you can wear them in your hair or on your shoulder, or use them as a cat toy. Anything you want to do with a mouse. This guy looks cute on top of gifts or stuffed in stockings at Christmas. And if you know people who like mice or like cute little critters, this is the perfect little happy spring gift to them too. And it's great to use up your scraps with, because this doesn't take a whole lot of yarn, and a couple beads, a little bit of yarn, a little bit of sort of floss, and you're done. So thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. We will see you again very soon on the Jayda and Stitches show, and we will have something else in the works for you. Might be a tip, might be another tutorial, who knows? But thanks for coming by and sharing some time with us. We really appreciate it. If you haven't already joined our Facebook community, please do so, because we have a lot of fun there, and it's a wonderful, creative, supportive environment with everybody posting pictures and answering each other's questions. It's a whole lot of fun. And you can also always follow me on Etsy. I have other stuff in my Etsy store for sale, little cute patterns. Some of them are examples of what we've done on the show, and some of them are special and unique to just the store. So if you want to check that out too, please do, and all of those links are in the comment box down below. Thank you so much. We will see you again soon. Bye!